Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before the story starts, I want you to notice one detail that mattered more than the cheating itself. The way she came home already carrying a script. Not remorse, just a ready-made explanation. When someone's first instinct is to manage your reaction instead of telling the truth, that is a red flag you can act on immediately. You do not have to become a detective or turn your life into surveillance to deserve honesty. You can set one boundary. If you lie to my face, I will make decisions without you. This story is about what happens when I finally follow through. The first thing I heard was the deadbolt turning. Slow and careful, like whoever was outside wanted the house to stay asleep. It was late winter in Tacoma, the kind of night where the rain sounds like fingers tapping glass. I sat in the living room with the lamp on low, fully dressed, shoes on, stomach tight. On the coffee table sat a manila envelope, a stack of papers clipped neatly, and a small mason jar of pepper relish I'd made earlier. I grow peppers the way some people pray. It started as a hobby after my mother died, something that forced patience into my hands. Reapers, Scotch bonnets, habaneros. I label every seed packet with dates and notes. That afternoon, while the courthouse clerk stamped my filing, I went home and chopped peppers with surgical focus. The heat burned my fingertips, and I liked it. It was a pain I could control. The door opened. Patrice stepped inside with her heels in her hand. Coat half-buttoned, hair pinned up like she'd rushed. Her makeup was smeared at the corners of her eyes, not in a tragic way. More like someone who kept wiping and checking. She paused when she saw me. The look on her face wasn't guilt yet. It was calculation, like she needed to pick the right tone before speaking. Pause right here, because the next 10 seconds decide the entire marriage. If you ever had that gut feeling and didn't know what to do with it, stay with me. And if stories like this hit home, please like, share, and subscribe for more real, narrated relationship dramas. I had been married to her for 8 years. I knew her patterns. When she was genuinely sorry, she got quiet and specific. When she wanted to escape consequences, she got poetic. That's what scared me most, the practice version of her. She set her purse down too gently, as if noise could make the truth louder. I waited, because I had already said everything I needed to say in ink. "You're up," she said, voice careful. Not, "What's wrong?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just a test question, like she was tapping a wall for hollow spots. I nodded toward the coffee table. The papers were there in a fan, the top sheet showing the county seal. Beside them, my wedding ring sat like a coin I'd stopped believing in. Patrice's eyes dropped, then snapped up to my face. "What is this?" she asked, though she already knew. She walked 2 steps closer and stopped like the air around the table might bite. I kept my voice even. "It's what happens when you keep making me feel foolish in my own house." My calm made her blink. Anger, she could handle it. Tears, she could spin. Comment, I was finished. She tried the simplest lie first. I was with my cousin. Her tone carried that familiar expectation. I'm supposed to accept the first answer because I love you. I didn't move. "Which cousin?" I asked. Patrice hesitated half a second too long. "Danielle." I picked up my phone and slid it across the table. Screen lit. A timeline of locations I had printed and saved, not just stared at. I didn't enjoy how her shoulders stiffened. I didn't enjoy any of it. But I watched her face change in stages. Confusion, then recognition, then a tight kind of anger that always showed up when she realized the room wasn't hers anymore. "You tracked me," she whispered. Like that was a sin. Not the night she didn't come home. Not the stories stacked on stories. "I verified," I said, "after I asked you straight up, and you looked at me like I was insulting you." Patrice's mouth opened, closed. She stared at the screen, then at the papers. A car passed outside, tires hissing through water. Inside, it felt like the house had stopped breathing. She set the phone down with a shaking hand, then folded her arms as if posture could protect her. "This is insane," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I nodded once, because I wasn't going to argue about adjectives. On the side table, my overnight bag leaned against the wall. Next to it, a shoebox with my father's handwriting on the lid. I hadn't opened it in months, but I'd carried it from room to room like a small weight I needed to feel. Patrice noticed the box and frowned like she recognized his trouble. My father taught history at a community college in Birmingham before he moved west. He used to tell me, a man can live through a lot if he stops lying to himself. When he got sick, he said it more often, like he wanted it to stick before he couldn't talk. I remembered his voice now, and it kept me from begging. Patrice had always expected me to plead, to bargain, to prove I wanted her more than my dignity. Patrice took a breath like she was about to launch into a defense. I held up one hand. Don't, I said. Not tonight. She flinched, offended by the idea that I could refuse her explanation. Then she leaned forward, eyes sharp. So you were just sitting here with divorce papers and peppers? Her gaze flicked to the mason jar, and her face twisted like she couldn't decide whether to laugh. I made relish, I said simply, because I needed my hands busy. I didn't add that I'd started chopping when I felt my resolve slipping, that the sting reminded me I still had nerve endings. Patrice looked at the jar again, like it made me unfamiliar. In a way, it did. The version of me who used to wait up with worry, who used to call hospitals and check highways, had finally run out. She rubbed her forehead. Okay, fine. I went out. I had drinks. I didn't do anything. The words came faster now, less careful. You're blowing this up because you're stressed about money and you want someone to blame. There was her habit of making my feelings a budget issue, a fatigue issue, anything but a trust issue. I had heard it for months. You're tired. You're imagining things. You're sensitive. I stood and walked a window. Rain crawled down the glass in thin lines. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light buzzed. I'm not doing the back and forth. I said, I'm not asking you to admit what you won't. Patrice's voice rose. You're going to break up our family over a suspicion? I turned around slowly. It stopped being a suspicion when you stopped coming home. We have one child, Isaiah. He was 6 then, a serious little boy who lined up toy cars by color and asked questions that made adults nervous. He was asleep down the hall, his science fair poster leaning against his bedroom wall, an experiment about mold growth and moisture. Patrice had helped him glue the labels on, smiling for photos. That's what hurt in a specific way. She could be devoted in daylight, then reckless in the dark, and act like both versions deserved equal grace. Patrice stepped closer to the table and touched the top page like it was hot. You filed already? She asked. I nodded. Today. She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening, and for a moment I thought I was finally seeing honest fear. Then she straightened her shoulders and said, You can't just decide this. We should talk to our pastor. She reached for a familiar lever, community pressure, spiritual optics, anything to slow consequences. I already talked to Pastor Lewis. I said, not because I needed permission, but because I needed clarity. Pastor Lewis hadn't told me what to do. He had asked one question. Are you trying to save a marriage, or are you trying to save face? Patrice's eyes widened. You told him about us? The word us landed like she was trying to include me in the mess, like we co-authored the damage. I told him I'm living with a woman I can't trust, I said. Patrice's jaw tightened. So you're perfect now? She snapped. You think sitting there in that coat makes you righteous? I looked down at myself. Black pea coat, work pants, boots still damp at the soles. I wasn't dressed for drama. I was dressed the way I dress when I need to move heavy things and not get distracted. I work maintenance for the city buses. Nights, mostly. The job makes you practical. A problem either has a cause or it doesn't. A bolt is either loose or it isn't. Patrice used to like that about me. She called me steady. Then, when steadiness stopped serving her, she called it cold. I walked back to the couch and sat down again. This isn't about me being perfect, I said. It's about you being dishonest. Patrice's phone buzzed in her purse. She froze. Then she reached inside too fast, like a reflex. I watched her thumb hover over the screen, then flip it face down against her palm. That tiny motion told the truth louder than any confession. Who is it? I asked Patrice shook her head. Nobody. She said it like a dare, like she wanted me to challenge her. I didn't. That was the first decision point. One of the moments I could have gone differently. I could have demanded the phone, could have made the night into a shouting match, could have pushed for names and details. Instead, I said, keep it, because I wasn't building a case anymore. I was building a life. Patrice stared at me like she expected me to lunge. When I didn't, her eyes narrowed, uncertain. So what? You're leaving right now, she asked. The question had a hint of theater, like she wanted to see if I'd commit in real time. Not tonight, I said. Isaiah's asleep. Patrice exhaled, like she'd won a round. See, she said quickly, you don't want to do this. You're just hurt. We can fix it. Her relief was premature, and it irritated me more than anger would have. I pointed at the papers. I'll sleep in the guest room, I said. Tomorrow after school, I'll take Isaiah to my sister's for the weekend. You'll meet with your attorney. I'll meet with mine. Patrice's face tightened again, because she heard the part she couldn't control. Plans with timestamps. She tried to laugh. You can't take my son. I didn't raise my voice. I can take my son to his aunt's house for 2 days. Patrice's eyes flashed. So you're punishing me, she said. You're using him. I swallowed hard. That accusation was her favorite weapon, because it made me defend my love for Isaiah instead of holding her accountable. I made another choice right there. I didn't defend myself. I just said, I'm protecting him from hearing this. I nodded toward the hallway, because I won't have him learning that lying is normal. Patrice walked in a tight circle, fingers in her hair, then stopped and stared at the jar of relish again. You sat here making peppers while you waited to ambush me, she said, voice rising. That's sick. I lifted the jar and turned it in my hands. This, I said, is what I do when I don't want to break things. Patrice's eyes watered. She looked away fast, like she hated that line because it sounded too true. I think that was the first time she understood the kind of restraint I'd been living with. Not just sexual restraint or moral restraint. Emotional restraint. The kind that keeps you from turning grief into violence. The kind that keeps you from driving to the wrong place at the wrong hour. I had been choosing control for months. I'd been choosing not to explode, because explosions make you the villain in someone else's story. Patrice's voice went quieter. Is there someone else? She asked. A classic deflection, but also a glimpse of her fear, that I might replace her the way she'd risked replacing me. No, I said. I'm too tired for that. She squinted like she didn't believe me. I added, I wanted my wife. I didn't want a new person. I wanted you to stop disappearing. She sat on the armchair and pressed her knuckles to her mouth, breathing through them. I felt lonely, she said. You work nights. You come home smelling like oil and metal. You don't talk. I nodded slowly. Some of that was true. My father's death had pulled my voice inward. My job kept my body moving, but my mind stayed stuck in a hospital room. Patrice had asked for more from me, and I had given less. I owned that silently, because ownership wasn't surrendered. Lonely is a feeling, I said. Cheating is an action. Patrice's eyes filled, and she made a sound like she was about to argue, then stopped. For the first time, she looked small, not in a helpless way, but in a human way. I didn't plan it, she whispered. It just happened. I didn't correct her. I let the silence make its own judgment. A week earlier, I'd sat in a booth at a diner off Pacific Avenue with my coworker, Darnell, eating eggs I couldn't taste. Darnell isn't nosy, but he notices everything. He'd said, You look like you're carrying a secret. I told him, I think my wife is lying to me. He didn't tell me to be a man or check her. He just asked, what you need to feel safe. That question changed how I moved. I needed certainty, yes, but I also needed self-respect. I needed to know I wouldn't keep swallowing my instincts just to keep peace. So I gathered facts quietly. I reviewed bank statements. I checked the mileage on the car and compared it to her stories. I asked myself hard questions. Was I willing to be wrong? Was I willing to end things even if she begged? Patrice wiped her cheeks. You're going to throw away 8 years, she said. Over mistakes. The plural made my stomach flip. Mistakes. I repeated, tasting the word. I leaned forward. If you hit a parked car once, that's a mistake. If you hit it 8 times and keep driving back to the same spot, that's a choice. Patrice flinched. She stared at the floor. How many? She asked quietly. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because numbers could become a negotiation. Enough? I said. Patrice nodded like she was trying to swallow something sharp. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, she stared at her purse like it was rattling with guilt. I nodded toward it. Answer it, I said. Or don't. But either way, this is happening. She pulled the phone out with trembling fingers and looked at the screen. Her face tightened. She declined. Then she whispered, It's Calvin. The name dropped into the room and stayed there. Calvin, not a stranger, not a faceless coworker, a name with edges. Patrice's eyes darted to me, measuring how hard it landed. I felt something cold move through my chest. Not anger, confirmation. From your job. I asked. Patrice nodded. She works in event planning for a hotel by the waterfront, coordinating conferences and weddings. She's organized, charming, and good with details. It made perfect sense in a bitter way that she could manage 2 lives without missing a calendar reminder. How long? I asked. Patrice shook her head fast, tears spilling again. Please don't make me do this, she said. That was the second decision point. I could have demanded the timeline, could have pressed until she described everything, could have asked questions that would replay in my head forever. Instead, I said, I won't interrogate you. Patrice looked up, startled. I continued, because I know what my mind does with images. I won't feed it. She sobbed once, loud, like that boundary hurt her more than any insult. At 3 a.m, Isaiah's bedroom door creaked. I stood instantly and moved toward the hallway. Patrice froze, eyes wide. Isaiah stood there in superhero pajama pants, rubbing his face, hair mashed on one side. He squinted at us. Why are you both awake? He asked, voice thick with sleep. The sight of him snapped something in Patrice. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Go back to bed, baby. Isaiah looked at the papers on the table anyway. Because he's curious and stubborn, he walked 2 steps forward and stopped. Is that a test? He asked, pointing at the stack. I crouched down beside him. No, I said softly. It's grown-up paperwork. He blinked. Are you mad at Mom? He asked. Patrice's throat bobbed. I took a slow breath. I'm upset, I said, but you're safe. You go back to bed. Isaiah frowned like he didn't like vague answers. Then he noticed a mason jar. Is that the hot stuff? He asked. I nodded. The very hot stuff, I said. His eyes lit a little, proud. You promised to bring it to Uncle Reggie's fish fry, he whispered. My sister hosts a Sunday fish fry even in winter, in her garage with space heaters and gospel music. Isaiah thinks it's a holiday. We still will, I told him. That was another choice, making sure one tradition didn't get stolen by the mess. Isaiah yawned and leaned into my shoulder. I carried him back to his room, tucked him in, and stood there listening to his breathing settle. I stared at a science fair poster about moisture and mold and thought, noticing damage early does not make you cruel. It makes you responsible. When I returned, Patrice was standing again, arms wrapped around herself. Her face was blotchy. She looked like someone who'd run out of strategies. He's going to hate me, she whispered. I kept my voice low. Not if you tell him the truth in an age-appropriate way, I said. But if you make me the villain to protect your image, you will damage him. Patrice swallowed. I didn't mean to, she repeated, as if meaning was the same as impact. Over the next 2 weeks, our house became a place of careful movements. I slept in the guest room. Patrice cooked dinner and tried to chat like normal. I answered politely and kept it short. Some nights, I heard her cry in the bathroom with the fan on. Other nights, she laughed too loudly on the phone in the driveway, like she needed to prove she was still wanted. I wrote everything down, dates, conversations, parenting schedules, because I refused to drift. At my sister's fish fry that Sunday, the garage smelled like grease and lemon pepper. The radio playing old hymns. My sister Reggie took one look at my face and didn't ask questions in front of Isaiah. She just slid a plate toward me and said, "Eat." Isaiah dipped a toothpick into my pepper relish and touched it to his tongue, then made a face so serious it almost made me laugh. "That is nuclear," he announced. Later, while Isaiah played with his cousins, I told Reggie the truth in plain sentences. She listened without interrupting, eyes steady. When I finished, she said, "So what are you going to do?" I told her my plan. She nodded slowly and said, "Then do it clean. No screaming. No revenge. Just clean." That became my guiding line. Patrice would later accuse me of being heartless. Reggie knew the difference between heartless and disciplined. Patrice hired an attorney who specialized in saving reputations. The first email we received was full of soft language. Temporary misunderstanding, marital stress, reconnection. My attorney, Ms. Valdez, wrote back with a parenting schedule proposal and a request for financial disclosures. Patrice got angry when the process turned concrete. One afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen and said, "You're really doing this like a business transaction. I'm doing this like a father." I said, She slammed the cabinet. "I made a mistake, and you're acting like I poisoned the whole house." I looked at the counter where Isaiah's lunchbox sat, superhero stickers peeling at the corners. "Mold spreads," I said quietly. Patrice stared at me, confused, and I hated that the metaphor was true. I didn't want to be clever. I wanted to be done. The hardest part was not the paperwork. It was the small moments that tried to trick me back into hope. Patrice would laugh at something Isaiah said, and her face would soften, and I'd remember why I chose her in the first place. She has a habit of humming when she's cooking, the same hymn every time, off-key. Sometimes I'd hear it, and my body would relax before my mind caught up. Grief is sneaky that way. One night, Patrice knocked on the guest room door. I cracked it. She stood there in sweatpants, eyes red, holding a folded piece of paper. "I wrote down everything," she said. "The timeline, the truth. I'll answer whatever you need." Her voice was small. I felt my chest tighten. This was a fork in the road. If I invited her in, we'd have a tearful conversation, maybe a promise, maybe a temporary peace. I took the paper from her and held it without opening it. "Thank you," I said. Patrice looked up, hopeful. I added, "But I'm not changing course." Her face crumpled like I'd slapped her. "So it doesn't matter what I do now," she said, bitter. I shook my head. "It matters for Isaiah." I said, "It matters who you become after this. But it doesn't undo what you chose when you thought I'd never know." The next morning, Isaiah asked why Mom looked sad all the time. We were in the car, parked outside of school, frost still on the grass. I stared at the steering wheel for a second, then said, "Mom and Dad are having a serious problem. We're going to live in 2 homes, but we both love you." Isaiah frowned. "Did someone break a promise?" he asked. His question landed like a stone because it was so direct. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "A big promise." Isaiah stared out the window. "Can promises be fixed?" he asked. I swallowed. "Sometimes," I said carefully. "But sometimes the best way to stay safe is to change the plan." Isaiah didn't cry. He just got very quiet, like he was filing the information away the way he files his toy cars, by type, by color, by what can be trusted to stay where it belongs. In mediation, Patrice tried to paint me as controlling. "He monitors," she said. "He's cold. He's punishing me." I kept my voice steady and said, "I'm requesting a predictable schedule and respectful communication." Patrice's attorney pushed for reconciliation counseling as a delay tactic. I refused, not because counseling is useless, but because Patrice wanted it as a shield, not a tool. I'd asked for honesty before. She'd offered performance. The court didn't care about our feelings. It cared about stability. My work schedule, my family support, Isaiah's school routine. Patrice's hotel job required late hours and last-minute travel. None of that made her a bad mother, but it made custody negotiations real. Patrice started showing up early to pickups, bringing snacks, trying to demonstrate devotion. I watched her try and a part of me ached, But it didn't erase the night she'd come home smelling like someone else's choices. Months passed. The rain turned to a thin spring sun. We sold the house and split the equity. I moved into a duplex near a small park where Isaiah could ride his bike. Patrice moved into an apartment closer to her job. On transfer days, we met in a grocery store parking lot. Because it was public and neutral, we kept our voices low. Isaiah carried his backpack between us like a small diplomat, eyes moving back and forth, learning what calm looks like. One Saturday, Patrice asked to talk without Isaiah. We sat on a bench near the park while he played. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't cover. "Calvin isn't in my life anymore," she said. "It wasn't worth it." She paused. I don't know why I did it. I believe she didn't know. Some people don't cheat because they hate you. They cheat because they don't know how to sit with themselves. "I'm glad he's gone," I said. Patrice nodded, eyes shining. "Do you ever miss me?" she asked. The question was honest, finally. I took a long breath and told the truth. "I miss who I thought we were." I said, "I miss Sunday mornings when you made pancakes and Isaiah danced in the kitchen. But I don't miss the uncertainty. I don't miss feeling like the truth depended on your mood." Patrice looked down at her hands. "That night," she said softly, "when I came home and you had the papers in that jar, I realized you had already left in your mind." I nodded. "I left when I stopped believing your words." I said. Patrice swallowed. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I watched Isaiah on the swings, legs pumping, laughing when he kicked the air. "No," I said. "Hate would mean I'm still tied to you, in a certain way." "I'm not." The first time Isaiah brought my pepper relish to Reggie's fish fry after the divorce, he held it like a trophy. "Dad made this," he told the cousins. "It's extremely powerful." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because the sound felt like proof that something survived. Patrice arrived later to pick him up, standing at the edge of the garage, unsure whether she belonged. Reggie offered her a plate anyway. Patrice took it, eyes wet, and whispered, "Thank you." After she left, Reggie nudged me and said, "You did clean." I nodded, but my chest still ached. Clean doesn't mean painless. Clean means you don't spill your hurt onto your child. Clean means you don't build your new life out of revenge. That night, back home, Isaiah asked for a bedtime story. I started to speak, then stopped and pulled him close. "We're gonna be okay," I told him. He believed me like it was science. "If you take anything from this, let it be this. Boundaries only work when you follow through calmly." The night Patrice walked in with a ready-made lie, the temptation was to explode or investigate until I bled. Instead, I chose structure, sleeping arrangements, custody routines, a public parking lot exchange, because kids need predictability more than they need perfection. And that jar of pepper relish mattered. 2. It reminded me I could put my energy somewhere real instead of chasing someone else's deception. Consequences don't have to be dramatic to be permanent. If you caught the small details, the jar, the parking lot handoffs, the "did someone break a promise" question, comment clean break so I know you really watched it. Then share and subscribe for more stories like this, because the next one starts with a lie that looks even more harmless. The end.